Gonna be this way. Swim so free.
A Capitol Hill to
Soccer bopper.
Welcome to Tune In Next Week, the podcast where we watch and review classic TV from the 80s, 90s, and before and beyond. I am your host, Brian. With me is my co-host, John. How's it going, buddy?
What's up, man? That theme cracks me up.
It is so uplifting.
You know, like, as we're listening to this thing, I'm thinking, like, this is the happiest theme song I've ever heard. You know, and I'm almost feeling like it should be, you know, like a cheeky newsroom kind of thing. You know, like I feel like when I first hear the ding, 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 you know, like a news anchor is supposed to spin around and be like, hi, you know, looking at the camera all cheesy and whatnot.
I can see it.
You know, like, I don't think astrophysics and time travel when I hear that.
I hear sunshine. I hear grass.
And rainbows.
I hear rainbows. Fuzzy floofs frolicking through the fields.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, what connection does this have with astrophysics and time travel? I don't know. But for those who couldn't tell from the theme song, we are talking about Quantum Leap, a show I have never seen before until today.
A show I've heard of, a show that I've always wanted to watch because the concept was interesting. Never watched a single episode.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing for me. I mean, like, I'd heard of it, I knew it was on, but it never grabbed me when I was, when I was younger. So being able to see it, this go around and check it out was pretty cool. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. It's something I think I might find myself watching more of after this.
Yeah, there's more and more on my plate since we started doing this. I've been watching a lot of Sliders.
Yeah.
I've been
binge watching Sequest, actually. Yeah. You know, and actually, interestingly enough, I don't know if you noticed this, but we have a Sequest cast member on this show as well.
I didn't notice that. Who is it?
Royce Applegate, who is the head of security on Sequest, is actually the sheriff in this episode of Quantum Leap.
Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
He was an asshole, too.
A little bit.
Good
actor, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the episode we're doing is Season 1, Episode 4 of Quantum Leap, called The Color of Truth. Original air date?
Original air date is May 3rd, 1989. This was directed by Michael Vehar. It was created by Donald Belisario, written by Deborah Pratt. Now, you mentioned the episode title is The Color of Truth, August 8th, 1955.
Okay.
Now, that's the title that I found in IMDb. The other platforms where you can watch this, Netflix, iTunes, Hulu, Amazon, they all just have the title of the episode. One thing that you found, well, we both found,
right,
is that if you're watching this on Netflix, the episodes are out of order if you're cross-referencing them against IMDb.
Right. So on Netflix, this actually comes up as Season 1, Episode 4, and you mentioned it's because Netflix doesn't have the pilot episode.
Yes.
Which I kind of find interesting. I don't know why Netflix would have everything but the pilot. But as you mentioned before, there are other services that you can watch this on, so you may be able to, still get a chance to see the whole the whole series, maybe just kind of bouncing back and forth between Hulu and Netflix, or if you buy the whole thing on iTunes, I'm sure you can catch it all.
Yeah, if you check it out on Hulu does have the pilot episodes, which is it's like a three-part pilot episode, which is why it's supposed to be episode 7, but Netflix has his episode 4.
Yeah. So just a kind of an interesting thing to be aware of there. And, I have to say, for someone that's never seen any of the episodes here, I like the fact that the very first thing you see in the intro is a little kind of, little description of what the show's about.
Yes.
Which I really liked.
It was one of the funniest things to me because, again, never saw an episode.
And he described himself as someone participating in a, quote, time travel experiment that went a little caca.
Yes! A little caca.
It was like, okay, so you're a scientist describing your time travel experiment going caca with happy rainbow music in the background. This is starting to make a ton of sense. Yeah.
Scott Bakula, babe.
That's right. So, and real quick here, Quantum Leap was a show that ran for 5 seasons, 97 episodes, and it ran from 1989 to 1993. So that is right smack in the middle of Tune In Next Week territory.
Cool.
And speaking of Tune In Next Week territory, we should probably talk about some business.
Let's take care of the business before we get into this.
I think that's a great idea. And speaking of Tune In Next Week territory, and not necessarily a place where we piss on to mark our territory, we want to thank JB Recording. That's the recording studio where we call home. That is our base of operations where we record this podcast for you. If you need any recording studio capabilities, get your music mastered, mixed, and so forth, definitely go to jbrecording.com. There's phenomenal folks over there. If you want to interact with us, we are all over social media. Tell us all about our social media, Brian.
We are found on Tumblr at tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com.
And that would be our base of operations as well. So if you were looking for like a website, that'd be the place to find us, tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com. How about Twitter?
So for Twitter, we're at tunein_nextweek, and we also post funny pictures with captions on the Instagrams at tunein_nextweek.
That's right. And also, speaking of TuneIn, if you are on the TuneIn app, great place for internet radio. We're also found on there. You can go on tunein.com, search for Tune In Next Week. You'll be typing the words tune and in a lot. But tunein.com, search for Tune In Next Week. You can find us on there. We're also on SoundCloud, tunein_next week on SoundCloud.
Is that it?
I think so. But, YouTube. Yeah, we need your guys' help. Please go to our website, tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com. Click on the YouTube link because we have this really big, long, obscure, crazy-looking YouTube link. And you can help us get a YouTube address by subscribing to us on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel by way of our website. Once we hit 100, we'll be able to have youtube.com/tuneinnextweek. Hopefully someone will take it. But please subscribe to us on YouTube if you can. That is the business. Thank you very much for listening, and good night. Have a nice day.
I like it.
Oh, wait, we still have to do the podcast.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's a good plot synopsis for this episode?
Well, as it turns out, I've got 2 of them copied down. I think Netflix's plot synopsis is better, so I'm going to go ahead and read that one. So just once again, for those of us just joining us, even though we're not live, that's okay. Quantum Leap, The Color of Truth, Season 1, Episode 7 if you're on IMDb, 4 if you're on Netflix. The plot synopsis goes a little something like this. Sam leaps into a southern black man who chauffeurs for an elderly widow. Sam tries to effect positive changes in her and her world before leaping on.
Very nice, succinct, to the point.
That's right.
And not as misleading as IMDb's, which gives you the impression that Sam is there to help a black woman.
Right, which actually is not the case at all.
It's not. He does help a black woman, but he's there to help his elderly
elderly white woman that he works for.
Yeah.
That his character he leaps into works for.
Yes.
So yeah, the IMDb's description is not as accurate. But that being said, let's jump right on in.
Why don't we start with outlining the concept of the show? We've kind of brushed over it a bit with our talking about it, but let's say somebody's listening who's never heard of or seen this show before.
Right, which would have been me if I didn't watch the show.
Yes.
And thankfully, right in the very beginning of the show, the main character, whose name is Sam, he explains that he is a time traveler as a result of participating in a time travel experiment that went a little caca. And he's basically just kind of leaps back and forward in time and becomes people from the time period. And then he has to figure out who he's become and then kind of figure out what he has to do, which apparently you find out he's got like this guy Al who appears every now and then, who sort of helps him along the way. And then they're in communication with somebody named Ziggy. And apparently Ziggy's the guy that has all the master plans and knows what Sam is supposed to do, and he conveys that through Al.
Okay. So, yeah, and...
that's what I picked up from it.
And that's pretty spot on. There's a lot of philosophical implications that go along with this concept that kind of blow me away.
Yeah.
So you've got a person in history. So like me walking around, I have a history. I'm walking around doing things.
Right.
Suddenly, I'm inhabited by Sam, and I suddenly black out and forget everything, and I don't know how to cook chitlins anymore.
Well, yeah, well, that's a great question. So what happens to the original person when Sam is visiting? I mean, like, is it kind of like the person is possessed?
Do they remember things as Sam remembers them?
Or do they even remember what they did as Sam when Sam leaps out?
But he's spent days in this person's life.
Right.
And he's had conversations with people. He's performed tasks. He's done things.
So I wonder, what is that like for the people who he's inhabiting? And then once he leaves, and then these people are like, "Oh, remember what I told you yesterday? Yesterday he was saying. Yesterday Sam was in this person. So how are they going to know that?"
And this is something. So let's get in the episode, because the first thing he does, the first thing Sam does when he gets into this guy's body, his name is Jesse something.
Tyler, I think.
Jesse Tyler?
Jesse Tyler, Jesse Taylor, something like that.
That sounds right. So Sam jumps into Jesse Tyler's body. He's in a diner. It's filled up with people. He looks around. He's like, "Oh man, I'm hungry. Let's." And I love the use of narration in this.
Yes.
The narration. Sam is narrating over what you're seeing.
Right, which is great for someone who's never seen the show before.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
So we start out with now, after having read the plot synopsis and kind of knowing a little bit about what I was expecting, I did notice that everybody in the diner was white.
Based off the plot synopsis, I assumed he was a black man.
Right, but you don't know that until he sees his reflection. Right. So we start in this diner. He's like, "Hey, this time leaping thing has got me hungry. I'm going to go sit down at the bar here and order myself some kind of a sandwich or something." And as soon as he does that, all hell breaks loose. Yeah.
That was my poor record skip. Sounded like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. So he sits down, and of course everybody's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Because apparently it's 1955.
Uh-huh.
He's a black man in Alabama sitting at a white counter.
And what blows me away, not just the fact that everybody's surprised and shocked, but two good old boys immediately jump up and want to beat him up. They just want to beat the shit out of him for just for that.
Right. And I just want to go on record and say that I cannot imagine what it was like for those who actually lived through this period. Because we've, in TV shows that cover this topic and, what we learned in school and all this stuff, I mean, it seems like this was such a rough place to live down south during that time period.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine it, and I would not try to imagine it. It seems like such an awful thing, but I'm so grateful for how far we've come.
Yeah, we have come a long way from those times.
Yeah. So he's obviously catching some attention doing this, and the lady behind the counter is saying, "Hey, are you here to pick up Miss Melanie's lunch?" And he's like, "Of course, I think so, maybe." He doesn't know.
No.
Sam doesn't know, but I kind of found it funny that he had to sort of put all this together pretty quickly without getting his ass handed to him.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
Sam comes in, sits down at the counter. Everybody's like, "Whoa, what the hell are you doing, buddy? Get out of here before I beat you up." So if Sam hadn't jumped into this guy's body, would Jesse have sat down on that counter? Because Sam sitting down at this counter is a catalyst for things to come in this episode.
Right.
And Sam only sat down at the counter because he was hungry.
Well, and he didn't know he wasn't supposed to.
Didn't know.
So I would think that if he hadn't jumped in, Jesse, the character he's jumping into, would not have sat down.
So after Sam...
Because the assumption, I'm sorry to cut you off, because the assumption is that had Sam not jumped in, Jesse was just there as he was every weekend to pick up her lunch.
Yep, just another day.
Because she, Ms. Melanie, the person he's working for, she has a routine that she does every Saturday or every weekend or whenever day this is. And he would be breaking the routine if he sat at the counter, of course, and he wasn't supposed to because he's not a white man. So, I think that this definitely is you're right, it is a catalyst because it's something out of the norm. It's something different.
My question to you is, after Sam leaves Jesse's body and people say, Jesse, remember that time you sat down on that white counter? What's Jesse's explanation? Well, I just got possessed by the ghost, and I want to sit down and eat lunch. That seems to be completely out of the norm for this guy.
Yeah. So
how would he justify that if somebody talked to him after Sam leaves his body?
It's a great question. He could say, well, I was possessed by a white astrophysicist from the future.
And I don't even know what astrophysicist means.
I just figured I'd go with it, So he does this, and then finally the woman behind the counter is like, you might as well just take this and get out of here.
Yeah, take this and go.
So he leaves, and then the title comes up, and it says it's the year 1955, and you got this old bat woman calling to him from across the street, and I gotta say, being that he, character-wise, that he was just dropped into this role, he had to figure his shit out pretty fast.
Yes,
and
he did pretty well.
Yeah, he did. He did very well. I have an issue with that, though, which I'll talk about at the end, but he definitely did pretty well, I will say that. So he goes over to this old lady, and this old lady's just complaining about, oh, it's so hot out here. I was standing outside forever, blah, 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 blah. And he's trying to figure out who he is, and he opens the car door, and he's like, well, ma'am, the car's unlocked. And she gives him this, she reads in the riot act, well, you better not leave my car unlocked, and blah, 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 blah. But she also comes across like the person who wouldn't open the door for herself anyway.
Yeah, she has no concept of human dignity.
Yeah.
And at some points, it felt like she was nagging just for the sake of nagging.
Oh, completely. I totally felt that. I even wrote down she's a bit of a diva.
Yeah.
But I guess that was probably pretty customary for people in that time frame who had people who drove for them and, slaves and whatnot. They probably just made the slaves do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, not to spoil anything, later on, we do see her open the door for herself. I was amazed that she knew how to. Yeah. I was like, wow, I'm surprised she didn't stand there and wait for him to open the door for her, despite the fact that he was doing something else. We'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, there's an exchange when they finally get inside the car. They have a little exchange, and I thought it was really clever how he was trying to get this information out of her. And he was saying like, oh, do you remember how I bumped my head? And I guess I'm not remembering things.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever because instead of just saying, hey, I don't know this shit, he's like, well, I bumped my head. Maybe you can help me. I found it very clever how he was trying to make it natural and totally believable that he just wasn't genuinely remembering it, but also not in a way that would be out of the ordinary.
Yeah, get her flustered enough, like using some social engineering.
Yep.
Get her flustered enough so she gives you the information that you're looking for. Just kind of irritate her and confound her because she's very irritable.
Extremely. So we find out. So finally, we start moving, and we're heading over to where their destination, which we
Charles.
find time is to visit Charles, and and I had a feeling Charles was deceased, but you find out they go into a cemetery and everything, and this is where you start to see that Ms. Melanie is a human being after all, because she gets out of the car and goes over to her husband's grave, and she starts picking up the weeds and everything, and this is where you see a little compassion from. Should we refer to him as Jesse or Sam?
I kind of vacillated back and forth in my notes. I'm going to refer to him as Sam because, except for his reflection, he is Sam throughout the episode.
Right.
So Even
We'll
though
call him Sam.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him Sam for this recording. But in my notes, it's like Jesse this, Jesse that.
Yeah, no, me too. And then later on, they call him Papa Jesse when he's cooking food. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, how many different things are we going to call this guy? So Sam is going over there, and he kind of touches her, and he says, "Let me do this. I'll pull the weeds up. You just sit and relax, and do your thing." And there's a little bit of more of an exchange here, and we kind of learned that she had been Ms. Melanie had been married to Charles for 50 years, and I guess he had recently died. And Jesse's, I guess his wife Sally lost four children.
Right.
So they have that kind of bond, and like I could tell there was a little. You could see that she didn't treat him like she didn't oppress him like a slave. She had some kind of ounce of care for him. She still maintained some kind of a boundary, but there was more of a human connection between the two of them, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, he is hired help. He's free to leave. He's free to not work for her anymore.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
But she treats him poorly, poorly. But like to your point, there are flashes of compassion and empathy, and she's not all bad.
Right. She's not great, but she's not all bad either.
They do touch on this a little bit later. I was slowly getting the impression that she was treating him poorly more out of habits than out of a real sense of meanness in her.
Yeah, she didn't have. She was. I agree with you completely. It was more of a habit and not malicious intent.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now
Al comes. This is our first Al. Al
Right.
comes here at the cemetery.
Right. So he kind of steps back, lets her sit with Charles at his grave for a while, and then we see him starting to talk to Al, and Al is like, "Hey, you realize you're a black man in the South in 1955. This is dangerous." And he says to Al, "Okay, well, what does Ziggy say I have to do in order to leap?" And apparently this is where we learn that Ziggy is, I guess, the big dick in charge.
Did you look into Ziggy? I didn't look into Ziggy.
I didn't. No, this might be an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
Ziggy, who you at, bitch? Who you at? What does that even mean?
But even I'm looking into Ziggy right now, but Al, he's a hologram. Nobody can see him but Sam.
Nobody can see or hear him.
Nobody can see or hear him, and we'll get to hear him later.
Yes.
But the fact that he says that, I've got some of my best friends are black, and this was a tumultuous time.
Yeah.
I have experience here. It makes him seem very godlike, like he's omniscient, omnipotent.
I
even.
didn't get that. I didn't see that from him. I can understand how I can see how it might look that way. I didn't see him as godlike. I just more saw him as, someone who had been through that before, someone who kind of had been there, but someone who's playing an advisory role. I didn't see that he had any more powers over Sam.
Well, how does he have all this backstory? How does he have all this background?
Apparently Ziggy told him.
No, Al himself says, I've got black friends and I've spent a lot of time down here. This is a tumultuous time.
He's got friends.
He does have friends. So is Al, he's a hologram, but...
Right, but this is what also doesn't make sense to me. A hologram, you need some sort of generator to generate the hologram.
Yes.
So my thought would be that Sam would put something on the ground, hit a button, and Al pops out. But like Al would just show up like he was there. So he's not so much of a hologram as he is like a ghost or like a, I guess a fellow time traveler or something like that. He's, the word hologram is kind of misleading.
Yeah, I would say so. Looking into Wikipedia here about Ziggy.
Yeah.
Ziggy, who is actually has a voice later on in the series, and it's voiced by the writer of this episode and co-producer Deborah Pratt.
Okay. Ziggy's a woman.
No. Well, yes. No.
Nice.
Ziggy is artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
It's an artificial intelligence that runs the Project Quantum Leap and helps Sam leap to each body. So Ziggy is the one that facilitates Sam's leaps.
I see. Okay, that's cool.
Ziggy eventually makes an appearance in the 4th season episode, The Leap Back.
Cool. Okay. So now we learn about why Sam is there. We learn that Sam is there to save Miss Melanie from getting smacked by a train.
smushed, if you would.
Yes. So he's like, okay, I can do that. So now we're back at the Mulaney house. We're back at the Melanie house, and what's his face? And Jesse's walking in with all these. Sam's walking in with all these groceries and everything, and then we meet this guy named Clayton, who I can't stand. He's clearly got a bug up his ass.
Oh yeah, this guy is smug. I wouldn't say smug.
I would say smug.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I guess that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. He says to his mother is Miss Mulaney or Melanie. I'm probably gonna call him Mulaney. He says he's like I got to talk to Jesse here about something. Jesse/Sam. So she's like, okay, whatever. So they go in the kitchen and he starts talking about the deal with sitting at the counter earlier.
Yes.
And he's like, what are you doing sitting at the counter? You're not supposed to do that. The counter's not for colored people, blah, 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 all that shit. And of course, this is one of those situations where I feel like Sam's forgotten who he is, or he doesn't quite get it, who he is. And he's ruffling feathers by what he thought was an innocuous thing.
Yes. So Clayton comes at Sam pretty aggressively in this encounter, drops the N-word.
Yeah.
And Sam visibly becomes upset. Just, you can see it in his face, just angry almost.
Right.
And he kind of comes back at Clayton a little bit. He kind of does, it's hard to describe. He just kind of moves quickly towards Clayton, like he's gonna come at him.
Right.
But he kind of stops and feints.
Right.
Like, all right, I'm just going to walk past you now. But Clayton kind of jumped back a little bit and kind of flinched.
Right.
And I loved that.
Oh, yeah.
But Sam was incensed at the N-word.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I've got a question.
Yeah.
This is 1989.
Yeah.
1989, NBC. How do they get away with dropping the N-word?
Well, I don't know if you noticed, but they didn't say the N-word in its complete...
They did. They did. They did. They didn't.
I don't want to say the N-word. I hate the N-word.
I'm not
going. They say it. I don't recall hearing it said ER. I've heard it said RA.
And I actually rewound it and put on subtitles. In the kitchen, Clayton called him a hard R, N-word with a hard R.
Yeah.
But then Melanie and Clayton kind of talking back and forth, they used...
Any permutation of that word, you're still saying the same thing, which I don't know why they got away with it.
And Sam brings it up.
Yeah.
Sam brings up, like, I'm a black person. She says,
Right.
What do you mean a black person? It's like, I'm a black person. Don't call me a Negro, because it's too close to the N-word.
Well, that happened a little bit later on when they were doing the tea thing, I think.
It does. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Let's get back to the kitchen scene with Clayton.
I guess Clayton walks out, and Melanie sends Clayton to the store, and because he says, "Hey, I'm going to come back later on for supper," and she says, "Well, bring me buttermilk." Okay, so fine. So he's out of there. Clayton is a little pissant. Like, I can't stand him. So I'm glad he's going shopping.
Yeah.
So
riles her up too.
Yeah.
She gets all like upset about it for good reason.
He gives her a migraine.
Yes.
Yeah. Poor Miss Melanie. Clayton's being all uppity, and he makes his poor mother have a migraine.
Yeah.
And of course the she's calling for Jesse. Jesse comes running in. Jesse/Sam, comes running in, and this is, "Are you okay?" And he sits her down. And then, of course, he's a doctor, so he's trying to, like, treat her and everything. And she goes, "What are you doing? Take your hands off of me." And he's trying to be nice and help her out. She's like, "Just get me a glass of lemonade." Like, okay, let's get you something that's going to make you more thirsty. That's brilliant right there.
She also drops one of my favorite lines of the episode, though.
What's that?
So she says, "Oh, I'm having a headache," and he's like, "Are you okay? I can get you something to help you out." And she's like,
Yeah.
"What, do you have a medical degree?" And he's like, "Oh, I got a little bit of a medical background." Yeah. And then she tells him to keep his colored voodoo to himself.
I wrote that down too. Like, I mean, and then the next thing I wrote was, "I don't get this woman."
No,
because on the one, like when they're in the graveyard and they're having that little moment between the two of them, and then even in the car, the way they're talking to each other, you can tell that she just treats him the way she treats him, not out of maliciousness, but he's trying to be nice, and she's just like, get your colored voodoo away from me, like, bitch, I'm trying to help you.
Well, she's 90. She's fucking 90 years old.
Yeah.
It's a habit that's hard to break.
Sure.
This is Sam we're talking about here. Somebody who's coming in and acting completely differently than Jesse would act.
That's very true. So he goes and gets the lemonade for Her Highness, and now there's a knock at the door. We meet a young girl named Nell.
Yes.
Who is apparently his granddaughter.
Granddaughter, yes.
Let me get my genders mixed. So we meet Nell, who is Jesse's granddaughter, and she's there to drive him home. And he goes and gives Her Highness her lemonade, and she says, "You have a good night." So he goes, "Okay, going home. Goodbye." So they leave, and we learn that Nell's a bit of a speed demon.
Yeah.
While she's driving home, and even Nell is talking to him about the whole sitting at the counter.
Yeah.
Thing. So like apparently his little 30-second innocuous thing is like big news.
Oh yeah.
Everybody's talking about it.
For a small town like that, not surprised at all. Everybody talks to everybody in towns like that.
Right. So she's driving real fast, and you learn that she's driving fast to get Jesse home so he can cook chitlins. Now I just learned what chitlins are. Apparently pig intestines.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I am on the same wavelength as Sam in this episode. It's something I've heard of. It's something that I've always associated with comfort food, soul food, if you will.
Sure.
But I never looked into it. I just thought, they go with collard greens. They go with
it's like Southern cooking.
Yeah. Pig intestines.
Yeah, not something I want to try. I'm sure they are tasty, but not something I want to try.
You know what? I would try them just to say that I tried them. They might. I mean, they're beloved by people in the South.
True.
So I would give them a try.
Okay.
And if they're
That's
good,
cool.
hell, I'll eat them again. But
all right,
I don't expect to like them.
Okay, fair enough. So anyway, of course, now we learn that Sam has to cook chitlins, for the people back at his home.
It's like a church event, right?
Yeah, and he's like, I don't know how to make those. And thankfully, this is where Al drops in again, and Al says, "Hey, I've got a killer recipe for chitlins." And he's like, "Oh, that's great." And of course, while he's cooking his chitlins, everybody's leaving the room. And they're like, "Well, hey, I got to go on this." One woman says, "I got to go help so and so with her dress," and someone else is like, "Hey, we're gonna, leave the room. We'll give you room to cook your chitlins." So it's just Sam and Al in the room, and Al's like, "Well, add this and add this and add this."
So as people were leaving the room, Sam was like, "Well, don't you want to stay and give me a hand?" He's like, "Well, you cook chitlins all the time."
Yeah, you volunteered to do this.
Yeah, if you didn't want to do this, you shouldn't have volunteered. This is
Right.
another example of the people Sam inhabits suddenly lose their skills, suddenly forget their memories.
Right.
They're completely different people.
Right. Exactly. So he's making his him and Al are putting their chitlins together, and there's a couple of family members come in and talk to him and everything, and one of the guys comes in and tries the sauce and says, "Hey, it needs a little more salt," and you don't really see the outcome of that. I guess the assumption is that people have a nice hearty meal and they like it.
Yeah.
But
that's actually the pastor who
Yes.
is also his son.
Right. Jesse's talking to Al, and I wrote this down. He makes this really astute point. He says, "People see me as a black man, not a hungry man."
Yes. So Al.
That's a powerful line.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's like they only see what's on the outside. They don't see that this is genuinely a man who's hungry, another human being that's hungry.
Yep.
They just see, oh, it's some black dude that's
Yeah.
hungry. Yeah.
Al is incensed at what Sam did. How could you sit at the counter? Why are you rocking the boat? You're here to save Melanie. What is your problem?
Right, but I take issue with that because at the moment he did that, he didn't know who he was.
I agree.
How should he have known not to sit there? He didn't know what year it was. He didn't know he was a black guy. How would he have known?
You're right. However, the conversation continues, And Sam is insinuating, well, something needs to be done. This is not right. I should be able to sit at a counter.
Right.
I'm a hungry man, not a black man. So that's how I want to be seen.
Right.
So Sam is right. Of course Sam is right, but Sam is a goddamn time traveler. He's in body and body and body, and Al is his mentor, his guide, his kind of go-between between Ziggy.
So shouldn't Al tell him before he, when he leaps into somebody's body, shouldn't Al tell him who he is before he interacts with anybody?
Al doesn't know, same as Sam doesn't know. My issue with this is, Sam, why don't you trust Al? You are on a fantastical adventure, and your only constant in this adventure is Al. Why not trust Al?
Well, yeah,
why are you fighting this guy?
True, but Al wasn't there when he first inhabited Jesse's body.
You're right.
He was on his own, so he had to fend for himself, just standing in the middle of that diner being hungry.
And you're right, and I would have done the same thing if I were Sam.
Me too.
However, during this Chitlin cook-off, Sam is kind of railing against Al, like, we should start the civil rights movement now. And I was like, no, it's gonna work itself out.
Right, and I agree with Al, which I'll talk about later.
I agree with Al also.
Yeah.
I disagree with Sam. That's my whole point.
Yeah, I disagree with Sam wanting to rock the boat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But let's move on because we've got a lot more to talk about. So there's a scream that comes from the other room, and we run outside, and of course there's a burning cross on their lawn.
Yeah, that was
heavy.
Didn't expect that.
Me neither.
I wasn't really surprised by much, but the burning cross on the lawn was like out of left field for me, anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, this is all because of Jesse sitting at the counter.
It is that catalyst.
It's so much happened as a result of this, and it's again, it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of the episode. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Sam is moved by this, and the next day we see him talking to the sheriff.
Talking to your boy, the
And
sheriff.
The sheriff, who is, Royce Applegate from Sequest. And, he's saying that, look, these people putting a burning cross on my lawn, that's not cool. And, of course, the sheriff is like, well, you shouldn't have sat at the counter. And, just not... The sheriff's being no help, basically. And the sheriff's like, well, I'll talk to those guys. Like, yeah, go ahead, go talk to the guys. But, I mean, you're talking about what's normal to these people, and what's he going to do? He's going to go to the guys and say, hey, don't put burning crosses on people's lawns, and that's it?
Yeah, right.
Like, what really can he do? So Sam goes over, takes a drink from a whites-only fountain.
Yeah, and... not only drinks from it, just like washes his face in it.
Yeah, and two rednecks see him and they're like, "Uh-oh," and I literally wrote, two guys saw him, "Uh-oh."
Yeah.
So something's gonna happen, and they were about to go hit him, and the guy's like, "No, we'll deal with him later." So then the next day we're back at Miss Melanie's house, and he's trying to fix a water pipe, but it's broken. He's got to replace it. So he's saying, now this is the day that he's supposed to protect Miss Melanie from the train.
Yes.
So he's like, well, I got to drive into town to buy some supplies. And she's like, okay, let me get my purse, thinking she's going to go with him. And he's like, no, let me go by myself. And she's pushing back and forth with him. And he's like, fine, come with me, whatever.
At least he can control where she goes if she's with him.
Right.
So he thinks.
Yes.
While that's happening, Nell comes and he shoos her away.
Yeah.
And while Nell is leaving, the good old boys, thinking Jesse's in the car with Nell, they run her off the road. Pretty well done production value-wise if we step out of the story for a minute here.
Sure.
We've got a pretty serious car stunt where you've got this car that kind of flips over kind of off the road. So the way the camera was shot...
And the road was a dirt road, too.
It was a dirt road, too, which kind of complicates things. So you've got a camera angle that's on a steep incline.
Right.
I'd say like a 45, maybe a little less than 45 degree incline.
Right.
And you've got the car kind of flying out of nowhere, but sideways. So seeing car stunts and
The car probably went up on a ramp and then off the edge of the road.
I posit that it power slid into a ramp because it came sideways off of the road. So it almost came parallel off the road, flipped over onto its top. So to me, it looked like it was driving straight onto a ramp, power slid onto the ramp.
Well, this would make sense if she was getting run off the road, because she's driving straight towards a curve.
Yes.
She doesn't start the curve yet. The other guy comes at her from the side. She probably cuts the wheel and sends the car into a power slide because she's on dirt. She doesn't have traction, and then she slides off the road
and just flips straight. She's airborne for maybe 2 seconds.
Right.
Falls right on top. She crawls out and rolls over. Blood everywhere.
Yeah, which I've seen other shows with accidents like this, and they'll have like one little speck of blood or like one little trickle of blood come from the top. Her face looked like it.
Yes.
Her face looks like she got murdered.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, technically,
in a way, yeah. But that was pretty realistic.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're back at Melanie's house, and I guess she's having some tea. So he's setting the two places at the table for tea, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, you made this tea for me. I'm going to sit with you." And you learn that she will customarily make tea for him, but he has to drink it in the kitchen.
Yes.
And he's saying, "Well, you went through the trouble of making this. I want to enjoy your company and sit with you here." And she's saying, "Well, blacks and coloreds, what is she? Coloreds and whites don't sit at the same table together."
Yes.
And he's like, "Well, why does it have to be that way?" And this is like boat rocking that I would not be doing if I was in his shoes. I understand why he's doing it, but it's not his job to start the civil rights movement.
The conversation doesn't hurt. Having the conversation privately with Melanie doesn't hurt. Sure. I would have that conversation.
Yeah.
However, talking to the sheriff, that kind of thing, where I wouldn't have talked to the sheriff. Yeah. I wouldn't have dared. I mean, I'd be more aware of my surroundings. I wouldn't put my face in a whites-only fountain.
Right.
I would have had that same conversation Sam had with Melanie.
At least just to bring it up.
Yeah, just to bring it up.
Yeah.
But I get the idea. He's concerned about it. He wants to start the civil rights movement. Al has got a point, though. You've got no business bringing this stuff up at this time.
Right.
Do your job.
Right.
Get to the next leap. Let's just get it done. Get out of here.
Yeah. Save Ms. Melanie and be done with it. That was his whole point of being there. He was not there to be the next Rosa Parks.
Right. Rosa Parks and Dr. King were on their way.
Right. So anyway, so now we're in the car and they drive past the scene of the accident.
Yes.
And Miss Melanie actually notices this. She goes, isn't that Nell's car?"
Yeah.
And he's like, and he slams on the brakes and backs up, and sure enough, he runs down the hill, picks her up, and I made a note of this here. He goes, "She has a severe laceration. I have to stop the hemorrhaging."
It sounds like bullshit to me.
Using words like laceration and hemorrhaging. I mean, those are legitimate medical terms.
Oh, they are. A
laceration is a cut, and hemorrhaging is bleeding. But like,
is hemorrhaging bleeding?
Hemorrhaging is bleeding. Yes. So like, if you cut yourself shaving and you have blood blood coming forth from the cut, you are hemorrhaging.
I didn't know that specifically. That's what hemorrhaging was.
Yeah, hemorrhaging is basically means bleeding. Typically, hemorrhaging is used more in a severe sense. Like if you cut your wrist open, you're hemorrhaging from the wrist. Like a little bit of blood trickling out may not be considered hemorrhaging, but
right.
Semantics here. He's playing a character that's like a mid-60s black man, and he says, "She has a laceration. I need to stop the hemorrhaging."
Yeah,
I find that a little funny, But
I'm sure Melanie found it funny also.
Yeah, but this is where we start to see Miss Melanie have a heart, because rather than her being like, "Oh, you're not putting that person in my car," I'm not taking that, colored person in my car. Instead of, I was expecting her to say that, she opens the door for herself.
Yes.
Gets in the car, and then when Sam loads Nell into the back of the car, she's holding something on her head. She's saying, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be fine." She's being a person.
Getting blood all over her too.
Yes, all over her Sunday dress. You know? So she's being a person, a human being, and I loved this. Like I loved seeing Miss Melanie have a freaking heart.
Yep.
So he says, what's the closest hospital? And she says, oh, it's the one near the cemetery, but that's a white hospital. You have to take her to Vida, which is the colored hospital. And Sam's like, screw this. I'm going to the white hospital. And,
it's closer.
Right. And he pulls up there and he's loading her out. And the doctor comes out and she goes, he's giving his sort of doctoral diagnosis. She's got a severe laceration. She's hemorrhaging, blah, blah, blah. And the doctor's like, we're not taking her.
What do you mean you're not taking her?
It's against the law. I can't help her. She's colored. I can't take her.
She's gonna die. Take her right now.
Yeah. And of course he's like, no, I can't. The doctor's like, no, I can't take her.
And who comes to save the day?
Miss Melanie gets out, and this is where we earlier found out that her husband was the governor.
Yes.
And she basically says, doctor, you're going to help this person. Do you know who I am? You're going to help this person. And I was like, there you go, Miss Melanie.
Throwing her dusty old weight around.
That's right. That's right. So then they bring everything inside. Miss Melanie says to Jesse, hey, to Sam, why don't you wait out here? Because it's a white-only hospital. But she said, hey, I'll take care of it. Hang out here for me, and I'll come talk to you in a few minutes. So she takes the lead on this, and she's a real person, you know, and you can tell she genuinely cares. And that's why I started to kind of, I really started to like her character at that point. But then a little while, and then Al shows up, and Sam's talking to Al a little bit, and the cops show up.
Yeah, Al shows up, and cops show up. The cops are like, hey, somebody called the cops. There's a colored person being operated on in the hospital against the law. Whose fault is this? And Sam's like, well, it's my fault. I brought her in here. So they arrest him. Yeah. So before they arrest him,
he convinces everybody, because one of the uppity nurses actually called the cops.
Yes.
You brought a colored person here. I'm calling the cops. So he says, well, make sure Miss Melanie doesn't leave here for 30 minutes.
Yes.
And they're like, sure, we can do that. And then, of course, as the cops are hauling Sam off, Miss Melanie walks out the door, gets in her car, and starts driving away.
I knew that was going to happen, too. Yeah. The nurse was like, sheriff said you should stay here. Melanie's like, I don't need to stay here. I'm leaving. Nurse like, all right.
Yeah. And then, of course, Al is feverishly trying to get through to her, but Al is a hologram that no one can see or hear except Sam. And he's like, no, Miss Melanie, stay here. Don't do anything. Don't do it. And she leaves, despite any of his efforts. And so then she's in the car driving through, and you see Al's like talking to Ziggy, and he's like, put me in connection with her right now.
Yeah, he like teleports into the car with the help of Ziggy. Just teleports into the car.
Right. And he is screaming at her, screaming at the top of his lungs. She's like, oh, I wonder if I'm in the right gear. She's driving herself, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
She's driving herself, and she's like, I don't know, am I in the right gear? We'll get there when we get there. Who was she talking to?
She's talking to herself, but she's talking to Charles, her dead husband, but she's talking to herself.
Right.
And they're intercutting this with shots of the train because she's coming up on the tracks, and they've got this old school train coming through. This
steam train
locomotive. It's so cool looking.
Yeah. And she's getting closer and closer, and Al is yelling louder and louder, stop, pull into this territory, pull over, stop. And then finally he's like, stop the car, damn it.
Yep.
And she stops right by the train. And then she turns like to the side and she goes, thank you, Charles, you didn't have to swear.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hated that.
But it makes me wonder, did Charles talk to her from beyond? Did Charles have anything to do with this? Did she hear Al? What made her stop? That's what I kind of wonder.
I don't want. Well, I assume my theory is she heard Al because of the swearing.
I agree.
And I don't like that.
Why?
Because Al is a hologram who cannot interact with anyone or anything except Sam.
But we don't know whether she heard Al or not. Or maybe Al talked to Charles. I mean, who knows? We don't know how she got the message, but she claimed it was Charles that told her to turn.
Yeah, well, we know Al didn't talk to Charles. We don't know if for sure if Melanie heard Charles or if she heard Al.
Right.
My working theory, my assumption is she heard Al because Al swore at her.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
And that upsets me.
Right. Okay.
You don't follow your own rules, Quantum Leap.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, her life is spared, and now we're over in the jail.
Al saves the day, not Sam, who, that's the whole point of Sam leaping, is to save the day and then leap onto another person.
Well, in a way, he kind of did save the day because he got her away from... If he could have had her away from her certain death, except for the fact that someone called the cops and, you know, she got back in the car. So, like, it negated his efforts.
Yeah.
What happened in the story negated any of his efforts.
Yeah.
So we learned this funny little detail that apparently Al thinks about sex a lot, which I found
Really?
that
Where?
funny. Oh yeah, because Al was talking about, I guess, some of the women or something in one of the other time frames.
We're in the jail cell now, right?
Right. And then and Sam is like, do you only think about sex all the time? And Al's
that's
like,
right.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So, you know, Al's apparently a horny little hologram, but so then we see the sheriff come back in. He says, "Hey, you know, Jesse, you're out of here. We found out Nell's going to be just fine, and the boys who ran her off the road are sorry. They didn't mean to hurt her. Like, yeah, like that makes a big difference.
Big deal. So what?
Yeah, and then you see Al telling Sam, like, look, let's just get out of here because in a couple of months, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks are going to make history."
Al's right. Sam shouldn't get upset, but he is upset, and
Right.
he toes the line. He really, really does. But, you know, he does what Al says.
Right.
Puts his head down, grabs his coat, leaves.
Yeah. So Jesse goes outside. Sam goes outside. We see Miss Melanie and Clayton, who still has a bug up his ass. And Clayton's like, "Oh, well, you know, you should. If I had my way, you'd still be in prison." I'm like, whatever, dude. And so then Miss Melanie says, "Well, you're going to be coming over for supper, so go get me my buttermilk."
Right.
So he kicks him out.
I thought it was chicken salad sandwich or something like that.
Well, no, that's she sends.
Oh, she's sending it to Clayton. Yes.
Yeah. No, she's going to send Jesse over to pick up her lunch again.
Yes.
But they have a little talk about, you know, how, and Sam is saying, well, you could be an instrument of change, you know, by being more open-minded and, you know, think about what happened the other day and think about what happened between us and how we have really gotten closer and, you know, things like that. And you know, he says your eyes were open, don't close them again.
Right.
You know, something to that effect. And then she said, if you want, and she says to, Melanie says to Sam, if you want to go out and change the world, you're welcome to go do it. But if you want to work for me, this conversation's over.
Yeah.
And then she says, go get me my lunch. So he's like, okay, fine.
Yep.
So he goes back into the diner where the episode started. And of course, as soon as he walks in, the entire diner screeches to a halt and all eyes are on him. And, you know, the woman behind the counter, is you here for Miss Melanie's lunch? He's like, I guess I am.
Mm-hmm.
He goes up and picks it up, and then
who shows up?
Miss Melanie walks in. She says, you know what? I'm going to eat it here.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sam is standing right behind her. She sits down at the counter. And then as he turns to leave, she says, Jesse, why don't you sit down with me?
And
the rednecks try to stop it, and the sheriff is sitting there. He's like, nope, you guys sit down.
I love the fact that their first instinct is violence.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's sitting down on a counter with his employer. She invited him to sit down.
The governor's wife, the late governor's wife, sits down and invites her employee to sit down with her.
How is him sitting at the counter affecting your lunch? Calm down.
Apparently, it's the whole freaking segregation bullshit.
I know.
You know, but then as he sits down, you know, he looks at his reflection. You see Jesse's reflection, and then he leaps out.
Roll credits.
Pretty much, yeah. We see him as his next
That's
person
right.
that he's leapt into, which is like this teen with horrible
Pimply-faced.
acne
Yeah.
in a freaking car chase. So I'm like, I kind of want to see what happens in that
It reminds
episode.
me of like a low budget Grease. He was racing under an overpass somewhere wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
With a couple greaser friends, he just looks in the side view mirror. He's got aviators on and spiky hair and just acne.
Roll credits.
Acne.
So that's the episode, and I gotta say, I enjoyed it, man. I may watch another episode or two of this.
I'm absolutely going to watch a few other episodes. Looking into some of the IMDb trivia on this guy.
Yep.
The episodes are mostly based off of movie scripts.
Interesting.
Do you know what movie this episode was based off of? You got one guess.
You know, I don't know, but I'm torn between like The Color Purple or Driving Miss Daisy. But
You got it.
Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy.
Nice.
This episode was based off of that script.
That's a cool piece of trivia.
A lot of other episodes are based off of older or of the times movie scripts. So
Cool.
they take those concepts and kind of shrink them down into like however long these
45-minute show.
45-minute show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's such a great concept because
Nice.
you can play around with history, you can play around with fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah.
Before we get into highlights and lowlights, if you have shows you would like us to do, tweet at us at tunein_next week.
Yep.
If
Absolutely. And the other thing I was going to say is, people, please tweet us, and if we get a really funny tweet, we will feature that on an upcoming episode. We definitely want to hear from you guys. We want to know what you're thinking. Reach out to us if there's shows you want us to do. We're getting requests all the time. We're actually doing a request next episode. Yeah. So, tweet us at tunein_next week. Talk to us about the episodes we've done. What are you liking? What do you want to hear? Talk to us. We'd love to interact with you. We'll definitely reply to you.
Highlights, lowlights?
Yes. So, highlights for me. Such a cool concept for this show. This is my first introduction to this show. It was very clever, and I think it really shows strong acting capability because people had to act around Scott Bakula. Regardless of who Scott Bakula was, to the camera, Scott Bakula, the lead guy, is Sam. We see Sam, the viewers see Sam, but the actors and actresses, they had to pretend he was, an older black man, or in other episodes, I'm sure he plays a woman,
Yeah.
So, I just thought this show was done so incredibly well and such a clever idea for a show. I would almost love to see a remake of it.
I love that highlight because of the possibilities of other people that he would be. Is he going to be a mob boss, a CEO? Is he going to be a woman? Is he going to be
He looks the same to us no matter what.
Same to us no matter what.
Yeah.
But that's a test not only to Scott Bakula's acting, but like you said, everybody has to act around him, which makes them better.
Right. Absolutely.
I love that highlight.
Yeah. Do you have a highlight?
I do. My highlight is hearkening back to the kitchen scene with Clayton. I love Sam's reaction to Clayton's use of the N-word. Clayton's use of the N-word shocked me.
Yeah.
But his reaction to it was pretty visceral. It was a very physical reaction to it, and I believed that. Now, the fact that he used that word so callous, so just
Casually.
nonchalantly, casually, and Jesse, being somebody who grew up in that era, was probably used to being called that word day in, day out. The fact that Sam reacted the way he did, and it took Clayton aback. I guess this is coming back to your highlight, the acting, the performances. It was
spot on.
That to me was the highlight of the episode. Their interaction at that point and how it played out, and how I love how Scott Bakula just kind of, like I said, just kind of came at him real quickly and made Clayton flinch.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
And one of my favorite parts of the episode.
Definitely. So how about a low light? I've got one here. Once Sam figured out who he was, he kept forgetting who he was, or he kept doing things that he shouldn't be doing. And, all that boat rocking that we talked about, with him trying to start the civil rights movement. And I mean, like, I understand getting the conversation happening to try to open people's minds and everything, but that wasn't what he was there to do. He was there to save Miss Melanie, and that's it. He was trying to be all these other people that he wasn't. And I mean, I get that he was doing it for the purpose of an episode of a TV show, or that's what he was written to do. But me personally, I would have been a lot more careful because, like Al said, that was a dangerous time period for him to have been dropped into there, especially being a black man in the South in the 50s.
Yeah.
Not smart to be ruffling feathers.
This kind of harkens back to our Sliders episode.
Yeah.
Where Arturo and the gang are kind of meddling in the affairs of the world.
Exactly.
Don't do that. Keep your head down, survive, do what you need to do, and get out.
Right, exactly. It's like the prime directive, don't mess with the people's lives.
Yeah.
Do what you came to do and leave.
I share that low light with you, but that's not my chosen low lights.
What do you got?
My chosen low light is Miss Melanie's driving sequence.
Okay.
Her driving the car and Al interacting with her. Her hearing Al or having it implied that she heard Al. To me, Scott Bakula or the show says, Al, my hologram companion, who only I can see, they established that in the opening sequence.
Right.
So the fact that they imply that she hears him, I get that, maybe she thinks she heard her husband from beyond the grave. It's just like, follow your own rules, Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
That took me out of it. It kind of... And I was kind of into this episode. I was engrossed into the story. I was following along with it and along for the ride. And then that happened. I was like, come on now.
Yeah,
you guys can do better than that.
I'll give that to you.
I've got a stray highlight that I wanted to bring up a couple times, but I just never got the right opportunity to.
Sure, go for it.
Al's outfits in the cemetery.
Yes.
An purple pantsuit. with like some dark gray embroidered overcoat, and he had like a brooch for a that was nestled up between his collar, so he didn't have a bolo tie on, but I guess he had like a bolo tie without the string.
Okay.
In the cemetery.
He looked very futuristic.
Yeah. Every time you see him, different outfit. I love that. He had a ridiculous outfit outside the hospital.
Yeah.
When he showed up in the jail cell after everything kind of resolved itself and Sam got out, he was wearing this fantastic green yellow suit combination with a long trench coat.
Right.
And when Sam got out and the sheriff closed the jail cell, he just kind of moseyed up over to the bars and just started singing like an old Negro spiritual.
Right.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
I love Al. Al is probably my number 2 highlight, him and his outfits.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Now, Al's played by a guy named Dean Stockwell.
Yes.
And he's in this Stephen King movie called The Langoliers, which I highly recommend you watch because he plays the role of a novelist, like a fantasy novelist, and that actor just nails the role entirely.
Never saw it.
It's a TV movie, Stephen King book called The Langoliers with Dean Stockwell, the guy who plays Al. Check it out. It's a great movie.
I read the book a long time ago. It's like an alien invasion, and not like an alien invasion, but
not even.
The guy saves a bunch of batteries and stuff, and it's kind of like Pod People, isn't it?
No.
Well, let's just cut that out. Let's just cut all that out.
No, we're gonna leave that in. But no,
fuck you. No, cut that out.
No, the Langoliers. It's about a group of people that are on a transcontinental flight from L.A. to Boston, I think, and they fly through some anomaly while they're asleep, and then only like 10 of them wake up on the plane.
Oh.
And then things happen.
I had not heard of this.
But one of the 10 is Dean Stockwell, and he plays this very imaginative writer character. And like, I mean, it was a made-for-TV movie. Bronson Pinchot's in it as well. Balky from Perfect Strangers. He's in it as well. He plays an asshole that's trying to get to Boston. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies from that time period. But I highly recommend watching it, mainly because you see Dean Stockwell playing this awesome character.
I would check that out.
I watch this movie regularly. It's cheesy. It's got the low-budget made-for-TV kind of feel to it, but it's just a great movie with Dean Stockwell in it. So that's going to do it for this episode of Tune In Next Week. And by all means, please interact with us any way you see fit. Twitter at Tune In Next Week, Tumblr, tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com. And as the name implies, and as we ask you to do every single week,
tune in next week.
Tune in next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and hopefully you tuned in the week before.
Later.
See ya.